Hi, everybody. We are the Wildlife Wire, and we are going to be having a very special episode today. Is our first ever interview episode, bringing you a game that we have covered that we're all very excited about. But just to start off with some introductions, staying here and being depressed because it is now February and we keep getting rain instead of snow is Dominic Noce. I received my bachelor's degree in wildlife biology from the University of Montana, and I currently work with small carnivores in the Adirondack Mountains of New York.
And I'm Justin Ruby. Also got my bachelor's in wildlife biology at the University of Montana. I've worked as a academic researcher in the past, and currently working in education.
And today we have the developers of Wild Savannah, LudicrousCunningFox and Endershadow. We're very excited to have them both here today. Is there anything else that you guys would like to add?
I guess I'll start first. So hello everybody, I'm Endershadow. I'm the second lead developer for the project Wild Savannah for Roblox. I'm the map maker, GUI artist, as well as the sound effect designer for the game, as well as, just general concept arts for mechanics, things like that. I think Ludi now can go on and just present what he does and who he is, I guess.
Hello everyone, I'm Ludicrous, and I'm the lead developer of Wild Savannah. And basically for the longest time for the game's history, I've been the only developer. So I did the scripting, the animating, the coding, the modeling, all of that. Until recently that I have Endershadow now. He does his part with the game. So yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to get right into the juicy details. Ender and I already talked. We're going to know exactly what the roadmap is, and you guys are totally going to stay on those exact dates. You're going to tell us exactly when things are coming out. Is that right, Ender?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I really want to stay away from all of that because I see what happens on a lot of the videos that you guys post. I have followed the Zoo Tycoon 2 modding community for a very long time before Planet Zoo was a thing, and the first thing that I always noticed is that when people ask, when is it coming out? Are you done yet? What's next? Are you going to do this? Please do this. I want you to do this. That is a huge motivation sink for somebody, especially when they are delivering a product essentially for free as something that they're passionate about. And that can make us lose something that, could potentially be a great thing. And you guys have done a great job so far. You've been really good with giving updates whenever you feel like you have something to share. So I have good faith that we're going to get new stuff when it's ready and it's going to be good. And we just stick with that. It takes as long as it takes. That's my stance. I encourage other people in the community to have that sort of stance when it comes to this.
Absolutely.
So, to start off, what this is really going to be about is I want to get a good understanding, Ludi, this one's going to go to you in particular, is what really made you want to make an animal survival game, not just in general, but on this sort of scale, because this is, of course, a very niche genre. It's not something that exists at the AAA level. Why is this something that you really wanted to see happen as a game?
Alright, so like all of you, I'm very fond of animals, wildlife, just nature in general. And I just thought it would be cool to see that replicated in a video game. And when I was younger, sure, there were animal games you had Wolf Quest, the old version. You had various little games here and there, like iOS games and stuff like that. I didn't really touch those, but one thing I noticed is that they didn't really fit my they just didn't fit my vision of just that trying to find words for it, just replicating that natural just nature, the way animals behave.
Yeah. Right.
Most
Exactly. I think that that's a very important thing, and it's very noticeable from what you've done so far that that seems to be really taken into account.
Yeah, and the reason why I decided to go about making one myself is because I just couldn't. Again, none of those games fit my vision. Like, they just didn't have what I wanted to see in a game about wildlife and nature. So I took it upon myself to try to, keyword being try to do something like that. Uh, 2015 is when I started this whole project. I honestly didn't expect it to get to where it is today. Um, yeah, I learned a lot along the way. So, yeah, it's pretty. I don't know. I just learned a lot. It's just
If I
Yeah,
could,
I mean,
if
it's
I could
been
potentially
you
just
said it
like,
was like
if I could potentially
um,
just add a little bit on
yeah,
that, I think what he
sure.
meant was mostly about the expectations that we have for these animal survival games in general. Like, I do remember very fondly the early days of The Isle, which is, the very base game for all these animal survival games that you see today, whether that be on Roblox with things like Cenozoic Survival and now their new title, Ecos Labrea, or, new version of The Isle of Rima, or Path of Titans, Beast of Bermuda. All those really have their roots to the main game, which was The Isle. I consider Evrima a new game because they recoded everything from the ground up and everything. So I don't necessarily think that I'll call it iLegacy because I guess that's what they call it nowadays. But in general, that's where most of us have started to envision our own projects with this sort of base game, and this is where the idea of stamina, hunger, thirst, and all those being variables of survival. Not that it's particularly innovative in any kind of way to survival games in general. I mean, stuff like Green Hell, The Forest, all those things. Even Minecraft has those levels of variables of survival, but in general, that's where our main sort of essence started as developers, I think. But like he said, I do think that things like combat senses were not really replicated correctly. And even today, like there are very few games out there which actually replicate it to where it's both fun and intuitive and also makes the gameplay experience very, very enjoyable. So, I mean, there's a lot more going into it. Obviously, making a game is not as, easy as some people make it out to be. But definitely,
Not at all.
and I'm not trying to shame anyone. I'm not trying to say, oh, they're so bad at developing a game. Obviously, and if I'm being totally honest, if the Isle wasn't, or at least didn't exist back in the day, I'm pretty sure none of us would be here to do the projects we're doing currently. So that's my take on it personally. But do you want to add anything, Ludi?
well, I did want to add something. So yeah, I do agree. The Isle is acts like a baseline for all these other survival type games that are around today. But I do like to attribute my personal reasons for making the game to even earlier games I played on Roblox in like 2012 and stuff. For example, there's this very old game called A Dinosaur's Life. It was very bare bones. Roblox back then, everything was like blocks and stuff. But in this game, you had like little. They're just made out of like spears. They basically looked like, I guess, balloon animals or whatever, or dinosaurs. And It was a dinosaur game. Very bare bones, but yeah, the games like that, I feel definitely inspired me. But things like the Isle, yeah, definitely mechanic wise, yeah, gave rise to what we see today.
Okay. Yeah, so you kind of mentioned how you saw kind of the direction that this genre was heading, but you felt that there were those key things missing, and they were very important things to just the daily life of an animal. Is there anything like specific that you were like, this is what I really want to capture with this game that I feel like is not being done well right now?
So I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not sure what I was aiming for all those years ago. I think back then I just wanted an animal game that was, I guess, a little more realistic or whatever, or for the time, because Roblox. I mean, you can't really
Yeah.
get that all realistic, but nowadays it's just basically what I wanted to get was to get right was the interactions between the different animals. So like in a lot of games, the interactions are just, especially like when fighting each other, you just have the animals running around, biting, doing their basic attack. Uh, you know, attack this guy like 10 times and he's dead. Attack this other guy 20 times and he's dead. And it's just, I don't know, that's just kind of, I've always thought that was weird. I know it's a video game, but to me, that kind of interaction's just kind of strange for animals, I guess. I've always wanted it to be more dynamic, like, let's take the Isle, for example. Instead of having, like, I guess, Utah raptors running through, like cars, biting into T-Rexes and killing them, or, just staying behind them. Instead of that, like, jumping on the T-Rex, pouncing them, clawing them, or, let's turn it around. The T-Rex, it should be able to just one-shot those raptors. Like, grab one, pick it up, crush it in its jaws. Stuff like that. Instead of it just, phasing through its body. Or the Triceratops in that game. You could, if a T-Rex was hunting one, it could try, biting onto its frill. Interactions like that. Instead of just phasing through. Again, I know it's a video game, there's limitations, but
I
Trying to
100%
kind of
that.
give some personality is kind of what I'm seeing there, and just as a biologist, it really does come clear, and especially as a carnivore biologist, that idea of, it's not just, oh, you go and you bite this thing until it dies. It's, there's a whole lot of planning and prep work and, choosing your right target, knowing your terrain, all this other stuff that really goes into a hunt. And I'm sure that that's something that's really hard to capture in a video game, but if you feel like you've captured at least a good chunk of those elements, like, I'm sure it really elevates the experience.
yeah, exactly. And I'm aware that I can't make this game 100% realistic. That was never the goal, I guess, of mine. But I would always say as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
Given the limitations.
I personally
Have, something you wanted to
100%.
add? Yeah, there you
I
go.
personally 100% agree with Ludi. It's exactly what I was saying earlier about just in general the idea that the Isle didn't put the foundations for this type of genre, but didn't really expand on it the way I guess Ludi and I wanted, which is why I don't play the Isle anymore. But it's exactly what he said. You expect these large dinosaurs to not just bite in the air. Like the thing that happens is essentially the animal bites and then it goes through the body and then it goes back to idle animation. You'd expect a latching animation of some kind because that's what, real life animal combat looks like. The actual attacks, get stuck because it's hitting a body. I mean, I'm talking as if like I'm crazy or anything, but it's when you really pay attention to it and you look at animal videos, wildlife videos of any kind, whether that's in India, Africa, obviously, you just see these things and it just hits you sometimes and you're like, wait a minute, this should be how animal combat is done, not the other way around. And I think the best example currently that I have in mind with good animal combat in a game, even though it's kind of over the top, was Far Cry. Now, for those who don't know what Far Cry is, essentially a single-player game where, there's a storyline and everything, but there are a lot of elements of nature and survival instincts and stuff like that. And in those games, you have wide variety of wildlife available depending on the game you're playing, whether that's 4, 3, etc. And sometimes I'll just play around and, go around taking outposts and everything. And sometimes I'll stumble upon like a tiger hunting a deer or something. And you just see it from very far away just pouncing and properly, like, choking and everything. Now, it was kind of over the top, and the killing and takedowns were greatly exaggerated for the effect, obviously. But the idea that, the animals properly fought and, touched each other, and the attacks had actual weight to them, instead of just, bites and stuff like that, that just, I guess, clicked for me, and I was like, wait, this is how animal combat should be like. And I guess I kind of combined real life videos with that, and I was like, maybe that could be cool in a game. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to add my take on the matter. If you guys want to move on to the next question, I suppose.
Yeah. Justin, do you have a question that you want to ask?
Yeah, so I'm really curious, what was the decision behind, I guess, choosing Roblox as your like development platform? Was it kind of the like freedom of it, or kind of the nostalgia that you kind of have with it?
So it just happened to be what I knew. It was all I knew all those years ago. That's where I started, and I just decided that's where I want to finish it.
Nice.
I could always move to Unity or Unreal or whatever, but that'd require more years of like learning new material, new coding languages, stuff like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
No, I think it's smart to kind of stick to what you know, for sure. But just, we were kind of getting into this a little bit before, but you were kind of talking about understanding, it's a video game, there's going to be limitations, but I want to get it as real as I can. And kind of what is the thought process or when you cross these moments of trying to balance that engagement side of a video game with the realism that you are trying to accomplish with the atmosphere and the mechanics of the game. I know, Ender, you and I were talking a little bit on Discord a little bit about just records of leopards hunting eland, and how it's a very like rare event, and it kind of goes into nature, how there's all this individual variation within a species, but at the same time, you're limited by the fact that you're making a particular model for at least each sex, and but still allowing for kind of that player skill to take into account that individual variation.
Yes, I think Ludi can talk a lot about like the intricacies of how you design the animations because he's the main animator. I personally only do a few animations every now and then, so all the credits for the animations goes to Ludi, but I'll try to develop a little bit the thought process from my point of view, but Ludi will explain it at a lot more technical level, I'm sure, or he might bring you insights that I personally didn't bring up. But the idea was, well, the conversation you mentioned was about a report that said that an eland, an adult male eland, was killed by a leopard. Now, I don't know the exact numbers of the weights, but I'm pretty sure an adult bull eland is between 500 kilograms and 900 kilograms or so. I'm a European, so I use kilograms. Sorry for those Americans who are listening to us.
We're scientists. We use kilos as well. It's fine. If you're an American, just double it. That's pretty much all you have to do.
Okay.
It's not exact, but it's close enough.
All right. So basically, it's a pretty large animal. In fact, that's the biggest known antelope that exists on Earth today. And leopard is a very small animal. I don't know the exact weight of a leopard. Pretty sure it's around maybe 70 kilograms, something like that. I don't know. For the average.
An average male is, probably around there, maybe 75. The biggest record one we've had was, I think a little bit over 100 kilos, but again,
oh, wow.
That's, the record animal. It was huge. It was living in, this part of Namibia where there were no other larger predators and tons of kudu, so he got really big.
Yeah.
But that's in leopards, just they have an insane amount of sexual dimorphism because you've got females that'll be even smaller than a female cheetah, and then you'll go all the way to toms of that size. So that just the amount of size variation you have in an animal like a leopard it really changes what you're able to do with it depending on what size you pick.
Yes, exactly, and that fits exactly into the point I'm going to make. Is that people bring me those reports, and usually they'll say, oh, that's a given, so that, we as developers make the decision of making leopards able to take down adult elands. Now, as diverse and complex these scenarios can get, when you study these very rare scenarios of, hunts with large animals and very, I guess, not very, but smaller, or at least, very tiny in comparison, predators to those prey items, you realize that it is usually a case that is very, very situational, and there are very, very, tiny variables that, change the entire dynamic. Now, the reason why the main point of the discussion was, should we make, leopards be able to take down the eland bulls? And when you look at the report, you see that the eland sort of got panicked and went downhill and fell 3 times, I believe, something like that. And then the leopard actually choked it. So, since we don't have video evidence, my thought process on it was that it probably injured itself, or at least it got knocked out. And the leopard took advantage of that and essentially choked it. So what does that tell us about the entire scenario? It tells me, at the very least, now you guys can argue with me, obviously, but if the terrain was even, I don't think this would have happened the way it did. And because we only have this case to go off of, with the predation of elands by leopards, we can only assume that the only reason this leopard got lucky, at least that killed the eland, is that he just got lucky that the eland just went downhill and fell 3 times on its head. So I think this is why I say that those reports with very impressive feats, mind you, I'm not saying they're not, it's very difficult for us to then process them into, okay, so we don't have video evidence, meaning that we don't have video reference to make an animation for it, And the other thing is, we don't even know how this would play out on an even terrain, because we can't obviously make an animation where it just goes downhill, because what if someone tries to hunt something on even terrain? Well, nothing happens. So we have an issue. But the idea was that essentially what we could do is just allow as much different pounces as possible on as many different prey items as possible, to where it physically makes sense, because obviously people say, oh, well, lions take down bull elephants. Well, I usually say bull elephants are very tall, and therefore the lions can only nibble at the toes of the elephant. They can't really just, jump to the elephant's back without being seriously injured. And even then, the idea is that big cats usually pounce their prey, not to damage them, or I guess they do damage them a little bit, but the idea is to weigh them down to the point where they can access the throat so they can suffocate it. So how are you going to, weigh down an adult bull elephant, especially if you have a hard time reaching its back? So, so that's the main idea behind my thought process about these sort of things. And I hope people with this interview sort of understand why it's difficult for us to, accept these reports. Not that we're denying them, but it's just very difficult for us to pinpoint a reference for, first of all, the animation, and then just making it dynamic across, the different variables like terrain, stamina, all these kind of things coming together. So yeah, it's not as straightforward as you think it is, especially for us trying to make, a very realistic game. So yeah, that's my point of view on it. I think Ludi can add a lot more to it.
No, I feel like you got everything down there, so.
Oh, great.
Yeah. No, because I know it's, it's a big thing. It's like, okay, we know this thing happened, but then it's like, does it make sense to even allow it to happen in the context of the game? Because it's like, well, does that mean that you're going to enable people to just randomly trip and fall, and then they're going to be like, oh, that was BS? Like,
yeah.
That can happen.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea is like I said previously, you can still make a pounce, because the idea was that the eland panicked. So, I mean, like I said, we don't have video reference, but I can just imagine. Apparently in the report it said that the leopard jumped out of a tree and pounced on the eland. So my guess, it was just below the tree. The leopard took the opportunity and just jumped on its back somehow. Maybe fell off. I don't know. The eland panicked, went downhill, hurt itself, and then the leopard came and did that. So maybe we could animate something that sort of resembles that, or at least tries to mimic that, with like a pounce that maybe the eland kind of moves a little bit around. And then the player can decide whether or not they want to panic or not, because obviously that's a feeling, and it's very hard to recreate in gameplay. So there's a bunch of different variables, and I personally can't say in this particular scenario if this will be in the game. But what I'll say is, we'll try. We'll try to make as many scenarios as possible that make sense, and if there is evidence, please just share, but just understand that it's not a guarantee like lions hunting zebras. Now we have plenty of video reference for those. We have plenty of different variables going on in those videos, so it's easier for us to manage. But for tiny reports like this, it's very difficult for us to get it done inside the game.
Yeah. So just kind of tying into that right there, my next question relates to the research portion of this, and how much are you researching before you go into an animation, or determining what interactions are going to be when you pick a new animal to work on? And is that predominantly coming from video references to animations? Are you guys reading academic papers if you can find them, or textbooks, or just listening to documentaries back from National Geographic and stuff like that? What's kind of your process for getting informed?
Mm-hmm. Ludi, do you want to take this one, or do I take this one?
Well, I was gonna say it's kind of a mix of all of those.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll go first. Personally, I've learned a lot about animals in my childhood. Obviously, I think everyone watching the video, including you guys, started, really enjoying wildlife by just watching a bunch of documentaries from National Geographic. I actually remember, I'm 22, so I'm not that old, but still, I lived in a country where, internet access was difficult. A bunch of stuff was pirated. So um, it was difficult for me to find these new documentaries to watch, and my parents actually bought me a bunch of National Geographic CDs about different animals. It was chimps, lions, cheetahs, a bunch of those things. And I guess that's where it started. Now, it's just for context, but essentially that's where most of my information started to come from. It was from just regular documentaries that you watch on TV, on Animal Planet, National Geographic Wild. Yeah, the BBC documentaries as well. And I guess the one that started really to educate me was one that was named Wild Africa, and it was a series divided in like 5 episodes: mountains, oceans, deserts, jungles, and savannas. Obviously, the savannah one was my favorite. But that's where it started to get very scientific, and then I started to buy a bunch of books, but they weren't really like scientific per se. And very recently, I started to look into like actual scientific books, and I go to my uni library, and I read a bunch of books, and I try to educate myself as much as possible from just even the foundations, from just ecology and stuff like that. But for the game specifically, I look at a bunch of reputable sources, some academic papers if I'm lucky to find them. If I have a particular question that I think, or information that I'm looking for, but mostly, most of our information for the game is mostly on YouTube or Instagram or anything, because that's where most of the animal references we need is found. You can also find them in stock footage for sites like Getty Images, Alami, things like that for animations as well. And for references for photos and textures and stuff like that, you can always go on Google and try to find the perfect picture, and that's a whole nother malarkey that I won't get into. That's Ludi's speciality. Try to help him. He's never satisfied. No, obviously it's very difficult, so that's why he's meticulous about it, and don't blame it at all. Just playing around. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And we will eventually include something that is almost comparable to a field guide, which will be used by players to learn about animals, about some basic facts, but it'll also help you survive within the game's ecosystem, tell you a bunch of information. I won't get too much into that because that's a very extensive subject. But yeah, books, documentaries, academic papers sometimes if I have questions. And I also got a bunch of elephant sound effects from a site called Elephant Voices, which I believe is a very reputable site about elephant behavior, elephant ecology, and elephant vocalizations. So that's where most of my data for the sounds comes from. And that's how I actually managed to determine what type of vocalizations could be interesting to put in the game and what could not be. For example, there's something that is called a Let's Go Rumble, which is a call that an elephant matriarch does in order to tell the rest of the herd around to start to move. That's something I was never aware of, because that's not something they usually mention in documentaries or books. But it's something I learned, and even being an elephant fanatic, I didn't know about these things, and that's the great thing about learning, I guess.
Yeah, I would also like to add that in the beginning of this game, Wild Savannah, um, it was really so my knowledge of animals. I would say I'm pretty knowledgeable of animals, but more in a general sense. Um, so I knew a lot of animals from Africa, Asia, North America, Australia, stuff like that. But I never really knew about the details and interactions and behaviors of a lot of these animals until this game, like later on when Endershadow came around. He's more of the academic papers guy and stuff like that. Like for me, I just kind of how much does a cheetah weigh? Let me Google this, stuff like that. And but yeah, back then the game just took place in Africa as a whole. Um, so you would have different types of animals. There used to be great white sharks and gorillas fighting each other in the game because it was meant to represent the whole continent of Africa. But around 2017, I decided to just limit it to the Savannah region, and it had Savannah animals, but they were kind of all over the place still. Uh, so I wasn't sure if it was Endershadow that had this idea or me or both. I don't know. But we decided to keep it in the East Africa. So a lot of the animals that were in had to be removed. Like for example, springbok. If I remember correctly, that's more like a South African animal, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah, they're more of like an arid southern Africa, whereas East Africa instead you have Thompson's gazelle and Grant's gazelle.
Yeah. So yeah, it was replaced with the Thompson's gazelle. Funny enough, there was an older Thompson's gazelle model, like in the very old version of the game. So it's interesting how it went from that to the springbok back to the Thompsons.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically all the animals are more inclusive, like native to that region, more specific. It makes it easier for research, in my opinion. Um, and I feel like that's where Ender comes in, with the academic papers and such.
Yeah. Yeah, I do come in. No, but yeah, actually I think it was both, well, I brought it up, I'll be honest, but I never, ever force any decisions whatsoever on Ludi when it comes to the game. I mean, that's a bit off topic, but I think we have a great relationship when it comes to actually teaming up together. I'd say it's a flex, but I don't know. Some people may say it's not, but we almost rarely disagree on anything whatsoever. And usually when I bring up an idea to him, he's like, either, yeah, I totally agree with you, or yeah, I already thought of it. So we really like communicate on a very like basic level. Like we don't have like super long conversations of like disagreements or will this work, will this not work, stuff like that. I usually propose an idea, he says yes, and then he proposes an idea and I say yes, and it's just a constant positive conversations of yeses. So I'm really fortunate to work with someone that is like that, and I think he feels the same way. But when it comes to this decision in particular, I think he wanted to cram as much species as possible. And back in the day, I think it was kind of how this genre went. And it still goes like this. Like, you'll see in Path of Titans, you'll see dinosaurs which never lived together. Not even at the same time period. And they're all slammed together into one ecosystem. And the developers are like, yep, this is going to work. Just as a heads up, it usually is terrible for balancing. because usually these animals either have the exact same niches in their natal ecosystems, and it's very difficult to balance that. And I think that's one of the reasons I told him that it was probably better to set it to a particular region, and not only just a particular region, to a particular national park, which I guess you could still call region, which is the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania, which is world famous for wildlife sightings and everything. But yeah, it definitely was made easier for me as the map maker because I had a lot more references and I didn't have to really, imagine or be so creative with the level designing because I had proper references. Now, mind you, I still had to learn a lot because I didn't know the Serengeti very much, but I looked at a lot of maps and stuff like that. And now I know particular landmarks. That's how far I learned about it, and it just makes a lot of sense. And I was like, yeah, it just would really work for a game, and it makes for very interesting PvE mechanics as well. For example, we were thinking about stuff like AI herds and having herds of wildebeests, zebras, and Thompson's gazelle kind of spawning around certain parts at particular times of the year, not the actual year, but an in-game year, so that players could navigate in a thoughtful way of there's more prey in this area, therefore I'm going to move there. And for the herbivore players, there's no food there, so they also move there. So there's a continuous loop of movement, so that avoids the issue of hotspots and stuff like that, which maybe we'll get into afterwards. But yeah, it just, I guess, helps a lot when you know exactly what you're looking for, and it helps you create a roster which is also balanced and way more fun for the players, because as far as I'm concerned, the more you cram in, the less each dinosaur feels unique, and the more out of balance the entire game starts to become. And I think that's one of the reasons. Now, I'm not part of their development team, but I think that's why Sin's Survival was unfortunately cancelled and replaced with their new game that they set in La Brea Tar Pits, I think 20,000 years ago, with a proper ecosystem following what we know from the fossil records and stuff like that, because it helps balancing a lot. Now, that might not be the entire reason or one of the reasons at all, but I think that's a great example of, a game which is going to do well in terms of balancing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can confirm it did have something to do with that. I remember them telling me they actually, just basically basing it off of a specific, time, location, stuff like that. It's just better for balancing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, when they don't do that, I've kind of made up the term mosh pit roster because it's just it's just a mosh pit of everybody's favorites, thrown in, and it's hard to fine tune everything. And as you were saying, especially with the dinosaur games, it's people are well, we want T-Rex and we want Giganotosaurus and we want Carcharodontosaurus, and it's well, they're all gonna do the same thing, so how about you just pick one? And so you end up with 6 different theropods that are all doing the same niche, and it's just well, we're not putting, lion, tiger, the prehistoric jaguars that were the same size, and any other obscure pantherine all in the same game, because it would just be a mess. And so I think it's good from a balancing perspective, and I also like it because I think it's also good from an educational perspective, because it does at least a little bit kind of help teach, especially with somewhere like Africa, where most people in the West have a very Pan-African view, and they think that it's just very much the same across the whole continent, despite the fact that the continent is bigger than China, India, and the United States with room to spare. really being able to do that, and then it also gives the option for other development teams to come in and say, oh, we'll take this area and this biome and really actually show how diverse an area can be, and that it's got different environments and you have different animals that live in different areas. Like a lovely tidbit that I always like to tell people is, I think 3 of the more famous animals that live in the Congo jungle, which are the pygmy hippopotamus, the okapi, and the mandrill, none of them overlap in range.
Mhm.
They're all found in different isolated pockets of the Congo, but we just kind of broadly generalize the Congo as, oh, it's this jungle that sits here and everything's there, but they're still all spread out. So I am a huge fan of doing the more specific, accurate rosters for both balancing and education.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. And I think the most interesting thing about our area is that, first of all, it's massive. From a national park standard, it's absolutely massive. And, well, I guess I don't know if it's really well protected, but I know for a fact it's very old. And there is an event that I think many people who are familiar with wildlife in general, at least once in their lives, if they watched a lot of documentaries about Africa, saw a wildebeest, which for anyone who doesn't know what a wildebeest is basically an antelope with like a beard. And for reference, for the kids watching us, it's the animals that ran in the gorge in Lion King, essentially those black cows, as I used to call them, because I was an uneducated kid. But the idea is that those animals, along with other species, travel across the Serengeti following the seasonal rain patterns across the entire park. And they actually cross borders with another country, which is Kenya. And during that migration, these herds sort of cross 2 main river bodies. And I think what's great about our game is that we are going to try, at the very least, to try and recreate that so that there is a dynamic sort of migration event happening across the world map, where you have herds of wildebeest moving constantly across the landscape. And that creates sort of a very dynamic environment where predators will either stay in an area territory or maybe move around. That's the choice of the player. And players can obviously join that migration along with the AI and stuff. And they may not really interact with them a lot, but at the very least they'll see what's happening and they'll maybe follow the same route as the AI herds. And that creates an interesting dynamic and stuff. And it also gives the players something to do and to enjoy, because I think the main issue with this genre, I'm talking a lot about issues that may sound extremely negative, but I'm trying to point out things that our game is going to do that I think the other games aren't going to do, and maybe some people are not aware of. But in general, the issue is that aside from like growing your animal, because nowadays that's what it is, you start from a juvenile or hatchling, whatever, and you move your way up to an adult. That's the main standard, I guess, of what these games do as a gameplay loop. You grow, you start small, you grow, and you die. That's it. That's pretty much all of these games. You don't do anything else. Maybe Path of Titans does something a little different with skins and stuff in quests, but for the Isle, Beast of Bermuda, that was pretty much it. Those are the main games that I know that do this. I don't want to say other games that I don't play. That's pretty much it.
Wolf Quest would probably be like it's you go from being like a young adult to like raising your own litter, but like fundamentally it's still the kind of that same principle of growing. Mm-hmm. It's just you're growing somebody else rather than yourself.
Yes, but I do think that Wolf Quest does it better, because it doesn't put you in a position where you grow, but you don't have to do anything in between. And least of all, you're not useless the moment you start the game. think what these games lack mostly is fun. Like, the Isle isn't fun for me. Now, some people might say, oh no, the Isle is the best game ever. That's your opinion. But I personally think it's a very boring gameplay style because the only fun you have is when you're adult, and the only thing you can do is fight. There's nothing else to do. I mean, you can obviously breed and nest and stuff, but I personally don't think that. First of all, you don't have any incentive to breed. There's no reward for doing it, and even if you do, the only thing that you get is just social interactions, and then people log off and stuff like that, and it takes a stupidly long time to get people to grow adults and stuff. So I think that's one of those things that make our game different, and hopefully makes it better. And I think the main objective is still not only to have a realistic game, but at the very least to have it create joy for people who play. I think it's very important, and so yeah.
Very nice. Very, very good, vision to have. I really respect that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially when, like you were saying, like there's a lot of these games where there's the period of time for when you start playing and then when you stop playing, when sometimes you just literally do nothing. You just kind of have to hide until you're big enough to really participate. But then at that point, like you said, you're just fighting at that point.
Yeah, exactly. It's eventually something we are going to try and fix. Now, we do have stuff in the background that, I've talked about a little bit in Discord here and there, but it's still not in the game, so I'd rather not talk about it yet. And because we still haven't created any code, or we do have some art stuff for it, which I'm doing, which is kind of being created at the moment. But coding-wise and mechanical-wise, it's not even in-game, and currently it's not a focus. Currently we're trying to release an update that we've announced, I believe, a year or so ago. If I'm not mistaken, Ludi uploaded the video, so I'm pretty sure he knows exactly when that was. But yeah, we're trying to release this first to give at least people a sort of fun version of the game that they can test with good mechanics, good combat, no restrictions whatsoever. It's purely sandbox, with mechanics that people wanted for a very long time. Excuse me. And so that we can then focus on more in-depth mechanics to make the game even more fun, I guess, and more realistic at the same time.
Yeah. No, I think it's good to kind of step back, because I know, for example, like Ludi, you've said that you've been doing a lot of changes with the models. I know the zebra and the painted dog model remasters have been revealed, and there's this shift from doing the part models, which most of the animals are made of, to kind of this one connected model. And there is on the wiki a very ambitious roster list, but at the same time, you have really kind of captured what I would consider to be the popular, big, charismatic species, especially with what is coming in the recode. I think that probably rounds out everything except for Black Rhino. Black Rhino would probably be, I would say, the only one missing of that sort of tier of animal that people would be that would draw in the most amount of average people that aren't super wildlife enthusiastic. And so I just did want to get a little bit of a perspective from you, because on one hand it's good to have a vision for a game, but then there's the execution, and you are a very, very talented modeler and animator. I want to get off that first, but just kind of understanding the importance of putting that level of detail and work into each animal, and maybe if you want to just kind of say some things about that process.
So basically, when deciding, deciding what animals to add to the game, first off, I have a set of, or I guess, Endershadow and I have a set of criteria. Of course, it has to be in the Serengeti region of Africa, and yeah, we, I've decided, I've came up with a lot of animals for that, and actually, I'll be completely honest, I kind of zoned out a little. So could you repeat the question, that last question one more time?
Yeah, so just kind of understanding what goes into, okay, I've gotten this animal chosen that I'm going to work on. What am I going to do to make the model and the animations, and when do I feel that I've really got a good handle on releasing it for testing?
Oh, okay. So for that, trying to figure out the best way to answer that. So, okay, so I look up footage, I guess, of that animal, and look for the defining traits, the defining features of that animal. Like, what does it do? Like, for example, let's take the marabou stork, for example. It fishes and it scavenges. So when I'm making the animal, or at least the mechanics for the animal, I'm going to take those behaviors into account. And I guess modeling-wise, the goal there is just to make it as realistic looking as possible, like, texture-wise, make sure the shape is right. That can be hard. It could, if something is slightly off, people will notice. Like, for example, like the toes of the animals, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And for the back to the mechanics, once it has those defining traits, so like for example, the marabou stork fishing or scavenging, only then will I think, it's complete, it's ready, for the players to play. Or I could say another example, like the oryx that's coming up. Mm-hmm. The huge horns on his head, it's different from the current roster because, a lot of their horns are, shorter, so they can't reach behind themselves. The oryx, his horns is longer, so it'll be able to reach back its behind itself. And I see that as like a defining characteristic of that animal. So, of course, I'm going to add that feature to it, for the gameplay. It's realistic. The goal is to make it as realistic as possible. And I feel like once it has all its defining traits, all the realistic features, then it's, ready to go. Mm-hmm. I hope I explained that the best, as clear as I.
Yeah, no, it's good. We're not very knowledgeable on the game development side, so that part is really interesting for us, where it's like, okay, I want to do this, like, then execute it, and it feels good, put it out on the market is, it's a very foreign thing to us, but it's just really cool for us to see, because we'll notice in the animations and little pieces like that where it's like, I know exactly this little quirk, or even just like, I think he based this off of this video, like the aardvark running. It's like, I think, the video where it's getting chased by the brown hyena, it's moving very
You're
similar
absolutely
to that.
right. It's exactly that video.
Yeah.
That poor
So
guy.
it is really liking that stuff and kind of being able to pick into that detail as a scientist and an enthusiast, which is really cool to see. And I also just want to add on a personal note, I am really excited for the oryx because the hippotragons, that group of antelopes is a favorite of mine. And so I feel like a lot of people that have been talking about the recode, they're like, "Oh, I'm excited for crocodile and elephant and hippo," and I'm like the one that's like, "Yeah, I want antelope number 6 because I know a lot about it and I know, it's going to be really cool to play around with." As you were explaining, it's one of those antelopes that actually does use its horns to fight predators, and so
Yeah.
talking about those defining traits, being able to really do that, and I think that's going to catch less knowledgeable players off guard at first. So that's something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah. I'd like to add a little bit that I think I wasn't there. I just left. But I think Louis didn't mention the whole process of how you model the animal, which I think is something you guys might be interested in hearing. I'm not personally the one who models the animals, but I know the process, the entire process from the ground up and everything, but I'll just go over the basics and the foundations and the most important parts. So, what Ludi does, because he's the guy who models the animals, I don't do modeling, so he'll look for images, side images of the animal he's looking to model. Now, over the years, we've gone, over this several times and stuff like that, and we still, struggle sometimes to find good quality photos, of the animal we're trying to model, because there's a lot of variations between individuals that you don't know if it's present through the whole species or it's just, that individual which is a little quirky and stuff. For example, I remember very vividly, a few months ago, we were talking about the Thompson's gazelle remodel, and Ludi had started on his model, and then he showed me the picture of reference, and I was like, I think this individual has a weirdly shaped nose. So what I'll do is I'll look through several Thompson's gazelle male photos, for example, because that was the male model, and I'll make sure to compare it with the reference photo he has in order to make sure, okay, is this quirk that I noticed, individual or just completely present through the whole species. Once we've determined that, we just try to find a good picture, side view properly, so that he can properly, model the thing accurately to the form. He'll need stuff like behind views, side views, front views, and everything to make sure that all the proportions are correct. And after that, there's the rigging process. Now, I'm not too keen on that, but the idea is to create bones and articulations within the sculpt of the animal for it to move properly. And the more points you have, the more detailed the animation is. Then comes the texturing, which is, again, just you look for a photo which is, as clear as possible with very good lighting and stuff like that. And the tricky part is, most of us, for us, is to always try to find a picture which has no grass just below the animal, because it hides the hooves.
Yeah.
And for example, for the zebra, I believe, or the elephant, we always struggled, at least for me, I always struggled to find a photo that was good for reference that didn't have the grass at the kneecaps. So obviously we found one, otherwise we wouldn't have the zebra remodel we have today. But it's one of those challenging things, I guess, that people don't really think about when they're doing it. Obviously we could easily, well, I shouldn't say easily, I don't do it, but you could easily just paint the animal and stuff manually, but I do think it takes a lot more time, and it's also sometimes, if you don't have too much experience, or you just like the material, sometimes it just might feel a little off, and you might not be satisfied with the results. So I think that's why Ludi goes for images. He might correct me on that if I'm wrong. But
Yeah, that's exactly why I use images.
Yeah, exactly. But the tricky part is like you need to find a good image. Luckily, we have the luxury of doing this on modern animals. We're not doing this on extinct animals, so that's an easy point for us to take. And the final process is basically animating. So I actually have now a few phases that I've concocted, which is several animation phases. So first we do the idle and locomotions and stuff because those are relatively important for the players to move around and stuff. And also the idols, which is probably the things that you noticed, which not many people notice, but brings a lot of life to the animal. It's the breathing, the blinking, the ear flicks, little quirks that these animals do that people may not notice on the spot, but if you really look through it, you notice it, and it's a very important part. And if the animal is missing them, it's kind of like it looks good, but it's missing something that makes it feel like it's there. And then there's the locomotions that we use, video references and stuff like that, and that goes along with the combat and stuff. And afterwards, it's just video references and animations, and then there's coding and stuff and all those things that are more technical and less fun to talk about. Which is the balancing of the stats and everything. That's pretty much how we make an animal, at least from the aesthetical point of view. I guess then the last part is probably the vocalization, which is what I specialize in. You want to try to find recordings which are, first of all, copyright free. And second of all, you want to try to find recordings that are clear. Now, I don't personally have the luxury of having a microphone and a zoo in my house, so I can record all those species, weird sounds and everything. So I usually go on YouTube, internet, Instagram, and try to find recordings of these animals and try to sample those and tweak them a little bit to remove the winds, the bird sounds, and stuff like that to make sure it's completely clear recording. And then just afterwards, there's a little bit of research going in, and it's like, okay, what does this sound mean, and when is it used? And then it's when I start, creating sections. Okay, this call is used for broadcast, for example. We'll use line as an example because that's a vocalization everyone knows. There's a contact call, which is a very deep, consecutive little roars that lions do to communicate territory or to locate others and stuff like that. And you just go, okay, so this is a territorial call, so it's going to be separate. This is a growl, so it's going to be aggressive and stuff like that. And that's how you sort of start to make the vocalization. Obviously, there are a lot of variables that go into this, obviously, because what I notice in actually other games is that every single species has the exact same set of calls. Not the sound specifically, meaning that a T-Rex obviously doesn't sound like a Triceratops, but every species has a broadcast, every species has a passive call, every species has a help call, and every species has an aggressive call. But the thing is that when you look at animals, modern day animals, you notice that almost none of them have, all territorial calls. All of them have friendly calls. All of them have aggressive calls and stuff like that. So when you start to do this with modern animals, you sort of, I guess you grasp the diversity and complexity of vocalizations with animals and stuff like that. So that's something I actually noticed. But to sum it up, I know I've been talking a long time, but the idea
No,
is...
it's good. It's all interesting.
Yeah.
It really is.
Thank you.
I mean, I think the only thing was that I was going to make a joke that you were saying, oh, everybody knows a lion noise, and I was going to be like, well, Hollywood doesn't because they keep using tiger noises instead.
Yeah.
I can confirm that because one of the older versions of Wild Savannah, it was actually a testing area, and I gave these new roars to the lions, so, like the typical, or I guess not typical, but like, you know what lions sound like.
Yeah.
The guttural type roars, or I guess a call. And I added those, and people were like, it's like they didn't know that's what lions sounded like. They're like, that sounds like a T-Rex. That sounds like a monster thing. That's not what a lion sounds like. I was like, yeah, those are real. Those are actual lion roars or calls. It's not from it's not fake.
Actually, we still
Yeah.
like get like a bunch of. Well, we don't get it anymore, I guess, because we're less present online. But we still get like I remember very vividly, like 2 years ago or something. People were like, "Oh, the lion roar sounds very robotic. Can you change it?" I'm like, "Go complain to the lioness who called, I guess," because I personally I can't really argue with her. The recording was really great. It wasn't copyrighted, so I think it's fine if I put it in the game. But it's one of those things that you're really taken by when you don't necessarily do the research, or at least you know it from the get go. And I guess that's just to keep the documentary entertaining or the movie entertaining and stuff. So that's probably why it's done. But from a realistic point of view, that's not really accurate. But we won't blame Hollywood
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, accuracy is a big one with this game, because we also have people asking for things that aren't accurate, such as tigers and kangaroos in the game. But they'll also ask for things like the Marshall eagle, for example. It's the largest eagle in Africa, I think. And but
I
right
think
now,
so. I think it's bigger. It's bigger than crowned eagle, but like crowned eagle will take like really big prey as well. I think like crowned eagles, I think have like attack children. They're like crazy.
oh wow,
Yeah.
Well, you learned something.
yeah,
But yeah, I
There-
think
I-
martial eagle's the biggest. So.
yeah, and so in game right now, it doesn't have a lot of prey options, right? There's going to be a lot planned, but for right now, it can only hunt like hares and what else? Pretty much hares. That's the only thing
Yeah,
you
I
can
think
hunt.
that's it. Yeah.
And
And,
scavenge, yeah. That's
Yeah,
about
and
it.
scavenge.
Yeah.
No, it can hunt other birds, but it's not its main, or at least for us, we would expect players to mostly go for hares. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, hares and other birds, and so you have people asking me to add things like, or can you make the Marshall Eagle able to pick up impalas and stuff? And I tell them they only prey on the babies. They don't go after the adults. And the same thing for the Thompsons. But I tell them there's gonna be more prey options. We want this to be accurate. We don't want the eagle fanboys coming in swooping up like impalas and antelopes and stuff, and dropping them from the sky or stuff like that.
I mean, even
Yeah.
if they did, they don't have fall damage, so that kind of defeats the point.
Yeah.
I'll add I'll add fall damage just for that scenario.
Yeah, just for that scenario. Yeah.
Yeah, the accuracy. Yeah, I'll say that's the main thing. That's what we're aiming for. Realism, accuracy. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is that it always, I guess if we didn't do things realistically, or at least to the level we want it to be, I guess personally, but I'm pretty sure Ludi feels the same way, it just gives you a sour taste in your mouth. Like you're like, I could have, probably stick to the source material properly. Not necessarily to the point where it's exactly the same thing, but at least the essence of it is, pretty damn similar to it, I guess. So that's one of the main reasons why I personally want it to be realistic, and I think Ludi as well, if you can confirm that, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add fall damage just for that scenario.
Yeah, just for that scenario. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even going off of that, kind of talking about the fanboys there, I think probably the mechanic that I'm most excited about for that reason is temperature, because obviously in the current state of the game, and this is just a general thing that happens with survival games, is everybody wants to play as the big predator, and so you just have this overabundance of lions with not enough prey to sustain them, and it's like, well, on one hand it's a game, you want the player to be able to have the choice and play as their favorite animal, but at the same time, if you don't have that, it makes it unnecessarily hard on anybody that picks a lot of the other animals. And so I think temperature is going to be great for anybody that doesn't play as a lion, because it's going to be such a huge culture shock for them when they're like, I can't do anything until it's nighttime. Otherwise, if I move around too much, I die of heat exhaustion. So,
well,
it's
I do agree with that. I do think that temperature will bring a sort of, I guess, culture shock, if you could say. But I don't think the idea is to completely enable them. And I just want to make it completely clear. Temperature is only a thing because we want to make sure that people take in the time to not constantly fight each other. It's one thing that I've said before, and I'll say it again. This genre has an issue where players only want to fight all the time. In fact, even if you make a very big map, what will happen is people don't spread out. They go to hot spots in particular, and they create a sort of a mini arena where people just collectively go together and just fight each other over there. And then when players die, they keep coming back, and then it creates a continuous loop of people just coming to this area, and no one explores the other regions of the map. Now, we do have something to counter that for the future, and maybe we'll talk about it another time, but I just want to make it perfectly clear. If you people are lion players, I want to make it clear, you can do stuff in the morning and the afternoon and midday. You perfectly can. You just have to make sure to manage correctly your stamina at those particular times, because it will eventually, go against you if you use too much stamina during those hours, because you won't be able to recover as much. You might be in a position where you ultimately could die easily by something else. Especially since we eventually want you to start from a young adult stage, which isn't a juvenile. You're pretty much able to completely take care of yourself properly. You're just a little lower on the stats section of thing. Obviously, you look a little different from an aesthetic point of view, but the main idea is for big animals, especially, to start from a lower stage of life, or at least an earlier stage of life, so that you don't get access to the big bad apexes from the get-go. And temperatures is one of those things to mitigate all the fighting happening, but it doesn't completely render you, oh, it's midday, therefore I can't move as a lion, I need to sleep. No, you can very much move and fight and do all these things. You're just you're just limited, I should say, in your movements. You can't do what you can do in the current game. And it's one of those things that will come into play. And people always say, oh, you should make sure lions can't do this or leopards can't do that. And I'm like, from a balancing point of view from the combat, and I always say, just wait for future mechanics to come in, because those play an indirect role into those, and it just congregates together and makes the experience a lot more enjoyable. And a lot more survival-based. Currently, it's very sandboxy, which is why probably people just constantly fight, because there's nothing else to do. But we'll make sure that eventually you have a solid base game where fighting isn't the only thing you worry about. I won't say much more than this, but I'll keep you all in suspense for this.
Yeah, no, that was me exaggerating a little bit. It's just knowing, as somebody that enjoys playing as the subordinate apexes, like Leopard and Painted Dog, especially painted dog.
Yeah.
Just
I wasn't
having that
completely
chance to shine.
I wasn't completely sure if you were joking, but just in case people,
Yeah.
thought you were serious,
Right.
or we told you
Yeah.
in confidence, whatever.
No,
it's not the case.
No,
Don't worry
it's-
about it.
That's just me being like, well, if there was an accurate lion documentary that was indicative of its life that was an hour long, it would be 50 minutes of sleeping with 10 minutes of them actually doing something.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, you're all good.
But yeah, it was just to clarify and just to make sure. And again, I'm always gonna say this: we always prioritize fun over realism, but realism comes just after fun. So if we can make it fun and also realistic to what a line's activity periods look like, we'll do it just fine. It just will also make you realize that maybe line isn't the best choice for most people, because like I said, and like Dominic said, like maybe line isn't for most people. And I keep saying this, like if you play line in the finalized game, maybe you realize, oh, maybe it's not for me, especially if you're a male and stuff like that. It's gonna be really rough. So maybe you want to be a hyena, maybe a wild dog, maybe a more social animal, which is personally what I would go for if I would be carnivore. I would just play hyena or wild dog, even though my go-to is always elephant. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else to add on that.
Justin, you got any more questions your way?
I think we really covered them, because one of my big ones was like if there was any kind of concept art for the animals that went into like kind of if you were going for like an individual that you specifically kind of saw and were like, this is what we're basing it on. But it sounds like you guys really dig into the research and kind of try to go for more of the trying to find the right word.
I guess holotype,
like
you could say.
Yeah, exactly. The species holotype. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But the thing is, from an individual standpoint, the thing that will, I think Ludi can confirm this. I remember he was kind of hesitant on it. But the idea was that if we're going to do stuff that are individualistic, first of all, people said, well, at least requested that we do stuff like scars, cloudy eyes and stuff, which is, an eye which is completely blind, ears torn off and stuff like that. And we always say that those things are, I don't have the word for it in English, but I do think that it's something that just, it's not something you're born with, it's something that happens in your environment as you age, as you grow up, etc. So if we were to add those, it would be part of a consequence of you fighting. And it wouldn't be something that's just cosmetic, it's something that would possibly impact you. For example, if you're blinded somehow, you're actually blinded. Like half your screen is gone. It's not. It may look cool. You have like a white eye instead of like two symmetrical, perfectly well done eyes, but like half your screen is gone. I'm not saying that's going to be in the game, but that's the spirit we're going for. And like, ear notches and, scars and stuff like that, I think those should be earned through combat instead of just attributed through a skin customization system. I think that's better, I guess. But when it comes to skins and just more individualistic things that you're born with, I do believe that we'll try to make sure that you have different patterns. For example, let's say you have a friend who's a zebra, and you're also a zebra. You guys spawn, but you can choose different stripe patterns in order to look a little more different from your friend, just so that you look the same. You look like you're the exact same species. You don't have like red stripes or anything. You don't have like a crazy mohawk or Nikes or whatever. But at the very least, you have like certain things that set you apart. And eventually, as you play, you may earn certain, I guess, characteristics and stuff like that you earn through combat or disease or infections and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it from that standpoint. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that, if that was a system you implemented, I think that is a very interesting way to go about it that most survival games just don't. They just go for the cosmetic
Hmm.
avenue without the actual consequence, which,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a really unique perspective.
I just hope Ludi
Even
can
like,
confirm this.
yeah.
Sorry, I had a visitor come in
Oh,
Oh.
that while you're explaining all of that. So,
do you want
but
me to sum it up?
yeah, just sum it up.
Okay, so basically he asked if we were going to do individualistic things, and I said like stuff like ear notches and scars and stuff you earn through combat. And when it comes to like skins and stuff, you can't really customize it too much, but you can change kind of like the tone, maybe the coat tone, and I guess you could maybe change the pattern. For example, for zebra, I use zebra as an example. Like you can choose between like several stripe patterns in order to look a little different. I think we have that planned, right? You said like textures take a lot of memory in the game, and that's common knowledge for developers. But I just wanted to make sure that we're still doing this.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I did hear you with the ears and the combat stuff, the scars.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can confirm that. And as for the textures, like the zebra variations, yeah, textures do use a lot of memory, especially how detailed our textures are.
Hmm.
So I would say we would limit it to maybe like 3 or 4 at most.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
completely agree. I do think that it also depends on species. For example, I don't think aardvark really requires a lot of variation when it comes to individual stuff. But when it comes to
Yeah.
zebra, I guess it's more obvious. Therefore, it's kind of, I guess it's not required. It's just, I guess, better if we did it. It's not like if you have a screenshot, and I can send you guys the screenshot I did earlier that I posted on Discord, but you guys can just show them off in your videos. But like you'll see like it's a very realistic scenery and everything, but if you really really nitpick it, you'll realize that all the zebras have kind of like the same striping pattern, when in reality if you looked at a real photo you'll see like, oh, this stripe is a little different, and here there's no stripes, and blah blah blah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the problem with that is that that goes back to looking for textures because I use real life textures or like real life photos
Mhm.
for the textures, and you can only find so many clear, high definition photos of zebras with different stripe patterns. And, that includes the top view, the bottom view, the back view, the front view. Imagine that for 4 variants.
Yeah, and
All
imagine
have to
that
be
for
clear.
like 26 mammals.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I will say another thing that I noticed with like the texturing too is, as you said, it's set in Serengeti, and you actually do a good job because there are quite a few species here that are Pan-African, but you do acknowledge, even if this species is found throughout the continent or even on other continents, like this is what they look like here. So that
Yes.
was kind of the thing when I saw the painted dog remodel, is I was like, there's like no white on this thing, and it just turns out that East African painted dogs tend to just not have that much white in their coats.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm used to working with them in the Okavango where they've got like a good chunk of white in them. And so I was like, oh, it looks off, and it's just that regional difference.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, people are gonna think it's off when they do play it. So I'm thinking, uh, Andrew, you can confirm. Not every East African painted dog is just fully black. I mean, right? Some of them do have
No.
a little bit more color.
Yeah. I can confirm this. Some of them do have like whites. In fact, I have a documentary which is, I believe it's called Wild Dogs of the Serengeti. I'm not too sure. It's a very old documentary. I believe it was filmed in the 80s or 90s. And it had like a character. Well, I guess Wild Dog. It's an actual documentary with real animals. And I believe one of them was called Snow White, which was, a wild dog with a very distinctive white marking on her side, I believe, or something. But most of the pack was actually, dark in coloration. But she was the only female, or I guess one of the only wild dogs in that pack, which had a lot of white in her coats. So uh, it's more individual, but in general, just like human populations, if you have like a majority of dark colorings, for example, in the hair or stuff like that, and these people breed, then in that sort of landscape, the dominant, I guess, coat coloring would be generally just dark shades, basic evolution concept that I think a lot of people know. But it's not a given, and sometimes mutations happens, and you could potentially end up with a white skin. Well, not completely white skin, but you have something that sort of is unusual in the uh, in the um, in the subspecies that you'll find in game. So again, that all comes down to how many variations we're gonna do. And obviously, I'd want like 100 variations if we could, but obviously, like Luby said, it's very complicated. We need to look for very high quality textures, and textures do take a lot of memory. So unless Roblox releases something that makes memory, I guess textures take less memory, we won't be able to have like a lot of variations. But we'll try our best to provide a good amount.
Yeah. Yeah, and wild dog is definitely one of those animals that will have variation because of the fact that it's, this one's dark. I already know there's going to be people that they're going to say like, oh, I don't like this, I want it to look like this and stuff. So yeah, it'll have a few more variations, but, all more, darker compared to, other wild dog subspecies.
Mm-hmm. I'll say this, like, zebra and wild dog are by far one of the most varied in terms of skins, I guess, than any other animal we have in the roster. Like, it's a very weird coincidence that, these two were remodeled very recently, and, they're the most diverse out of most of the mammals we have, aside from maybe giraffes, and I guess, what other animal could have a lot of variations? I guess lions do have a lot of variations, leopards and cheetahs as well, but that's pretty much it. Wild dog is very diverse in terms of the different colorings they could have, but most of the others are pretty much just different shades. And I guess male lions do have different colorings for manes and stuff like that, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I do want to add, though, Wild Dogs of the Serengeti. I did find it's uploaded on YouTube, and I definitely recommend people check it out. Not just because it is footage of painted dogs in that East African environment, whereas nowadays most of what you see in documentaries is from Southern Africa. But it was a pack that was actually zebra specialists, which is not something that we really see a whole lot of nowadays. And so just even seeing that footage is really incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is one of the things that we're going to do is, well, I guess, if we were in Southern Africa, for example, if we set the game there, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have done so many research with zebra hunting and stuff by wild dogs, because that's a very rare occurrence. At least I seem to notice that the zebras in Southern Africa are, I guess, more aggressive and territorial than the ones in the Serengeti, due to probably either the numbers of zebras around, and just the fact that it's a different subspecies altogether, and as well as the habitat being completely different. So maybe that's that. I don't know. That's more speculation, but that's something I noticed, and that would have definitely influenced how we would have done those interactions, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely, just from what I know, and this will actually come up in a video that I'm hoping to get uploaded a couple days from when we record this one, but spotted hyenas in quite a few parts of Southern Africa, like parts of Zimbabwe and northern Botswana, do go after zebra quite a lot, especially the foals.
Yeah.
They tend to select for the foals and those parts. But yeah, I mean, it's I feel like at least my time in Botswana, you never really like with the herbivore diversity, you never really thought of like zebra as being like a principal prey item, like I think a lot of people do with Mara Serengeti.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, just because we are getting we are going for a long while, I just for like I guess two more little questions that I've got.
Of course.
I guess the first thing is like pretty open ended, but just is there anything important that you want to talk about that we haven't addressed?
I'll let Ludi take this one if he has something he wants to say, and then I'll try to wrap it up at the end.
There's nothing I can think of, especially since Ender really explained the animal making process. I didn't think it had to be that detailed. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I
Okay.
can't really think of anything else.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a very open-ended question, so I guess, you could go on and on about, different subjects and stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess, one thing I'd like to talk about is maybe, I guess, why we are taking so long, I guess, because it's one
Well,
of
yeah,
those
that's
things that I
important.
guess people request a lot and ask a lot, and because we do not have a Discord, we cannot like directly communicate efficiently with people, and sometimes it gets kind of aggravating, and I want to point that out and make it straight. We are just two people who do this out of pure passion for wildlife and nature and stuff like that. And sometimes we do get people who are, well, I don't know if they're adults or teenagers and stuff, and I won't get into that obviously, but I'll just like to make like a little point here and there. It's kind of uh, not depressing, I would say. That's kind of too far, but it's demotivating when you have a lot of people who are, I guess, always asking, when is this, when is that, and no matter how many times you say, we're just two developers trying to develop something out of passion, we're not making a profit out of this, we're just trying to have fun and stuff. It's very difficult for us to get to a point where we are happy with what we have, and that's because we're very passionate about what we do. And if it takes time, it's because we don't want to give you poor quality products and poor quality updates, because we could very much just release what we have right now, but you will not be satisfied with that. And I think that's what people are missing, is that just because it takes a long time doesn't mean it's not coming out, and just because it comes out early doesn't mean that it's good. In fact, most people will play the update for just like 20 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe a day even, and then they'll get bored and they'll ask you, "Hey, what's the next thing?" It's like, you guys ever satisfied? Obviously not, because the game is at a particular state that where there's very little to do in essence. In fact, I would consider the game, which is public right now, or at least the version which is, kind of like an alpha testing and beta testing, because we were trying to just test the waters and trying to find out where we could go from here and what we could do to make this more fun and stuff like that. What could we do to make this more realistic and stuff like that, while also fun. So there's a bunch of stuff going on, and just by hearing the creature designing process that goes into researching, modeling, trying to find the good picture, trying to find the references, trying to complete all the animation. And I just want to make it clear, like, a creature has like around, at least, I don't want to say, Louis can confirm this, at least more than 100 animations, maybe
Yeah.
even 60. If it depends, between 60 and 100. When Ludi is the only one who's doing most of the animations. Sometimes I do one, two here and there, but like, 60 to 100 animation for one person is insane. When you take into account that, studios like Nintendo, well, I guess companies like Nintendo, and studios like Santa Monica and stuff, need like 3 years to release like a God of War or a Zelda and stuff like that. And they have like hundreds of people working on this. So I just want to, try to explain our point of view and why it's taking so long. And it's just because there's a lot of stuff to do, and it's our main activity. So we have, personally, I'm in college. Ludi graduated recently. But we do have other stuff to do. We have hobbies and we have family and stuff like that. So that's why it takes time. But the good thing is that we're not giving up, and most of all, we're passionate about what we do. And most importantly, you're getting it for free. That's usually people would charge you for this. So if you're ever doubting about is this worth it in the end, just know that we're doing it out of passion. We're not doing it for the money. So yeah, there's just one point I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you pointed that out. Yeah, I said, I can't really think of anything else, but yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I would put that out there to the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, just a good closure for that too is, of course, Miyamoto's famous quote. A delayed game is eventually good. A rushed game is bad forever. We want quality, and again, you guys are doing this for free. Like, there should not be any expectation. It's not like these people are paying you, or if I was some rich entrepreneur and I could lock the two of you in a room with a bunch of money and assets and be like, make the game, maybe I would, but I'm not. I'm not that person. I don't have the ability to do that. So I think it is important to just have a realistic idea about that. But then just my one last question as well is, do you have any advice for other development teams, or if somebody's like, hey, I really like kind of the feel of Wild Savannah or the future vision of Wild Savannah, but I'm really passionate about Indian wildlife, for example, and I want to make something like that in India. Is there any sort of advice that you would give for kind of that process, or do you think that a lot of that's been covered in the interview so far?
I'll let Ludi answer first, but I do sincerely believe that both of us have, like any other developer, I think everyone who has developed a game or has done something in the realm of game development has something that is, I suppose, worth to share with anyone. Everyone's experience could be interesting and valued in any way. But I'll let Ludi answer because he's been a developer more than me, at least for a longer period of time. So I'll just let him answer first, and then I'll jump in if I want to add anything.
All right, so I'm personally not the best person to give advice, but I will say this: since I'm personally a well-rounded developer, I model, I animate, I texture, rig, all that.
Don't brag too much.
If you, I feel like it's good to build up those skills, like be well-rounded, just in case, you could always hire other developers that are specialized in certain, areas. But yeah, personally, I feel like it's good to be well-rounded in all the areas of development. Saying this for new developers, it's going to take a while to learn all that. It took me years, so, but I feel like it's good. It's good to, learn those skills.
Yeah. For me personally, I'd say the main thing that you want to do if you want to start, I guess, in this genre, is first of all, pick a location. I don't care. Pick a location, a realistic one at that, if you can. Make sure your roster is, based off of something that is realistic to help you balance things. And most of all, which I think is really important that people didn't do, and us included for a very long time, is have a plan stick to it and make sure you accomplish the goals that you set for yourself. Because if you just consistently just jump from one thing to another, you'll realize that you haven't done any work, or at least very little work, and you haven't progressed to where you want to be at this particular time. And that goes for a lot of things in life. But one thing I'll say, which is more of a knowledge point of view, is try to get a GDD, which is a game development document, or game design document, which is essentially a bunch of different chapters of what the game is, the characteristics, the roster, etc., and stuff like that you can find on the internet. You can just go, what is a game design document? And just look exactly what other characteristics your game is going to have. And if you stick to those, you'll be able to at least create some kind of roadmap to where you're like, okay, so I need to do this first, and stuff like that. But like Ludi said, which is a very valuable advice, is try to be well-rounded in every realm, so that at the very least you know kind of like how this works. For example, I personally don't model, but I know how the creation of an animal goes through to get to, me playing it. So at the very least I can help a little bit in that arena. Obviously Ludi's better than me at that, so I let him do his thing. But he recognized that he wasn't very good at level design, so he let me in charge of that. And because it's easy to do sound effects, I was like, let me do it. It's easy, I'll do it. And yeah, so if you can, and I think that's very valuable, have someone with you, a team of people who are, knowledgeable in certain fields and stuff like that. Try to have fun, most importantly. And just try to stick to a game design document, and yeah, just, it will take some time, like he said, to learn valuable skills and stuff like that, but I think in the end it's worth it if you really want to stick to it. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I think that's just some great points to have for people, just because we have been talking about other development teams and other visions and things like that. I think it's, it's good to get a piece of advice, and just especially, for me, and I think I also speak for Justin on this, just as people that are involved in wildlife for a career, being impressed by the product that we're seeing makes us want to, kind of understand a bit more what's going on in your heads as you're making the game. So this was great to have you guys on.
Oh, thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything you want to ask us, I guess? I don't know.
You want to ask them something?
Well, I did ask about your channel. I'm definitely going to check that out later.
Yeah. So you'll find this here. Definitely, we have actually, so on our YouTube channel, there's I think it's the About tab. You can scroll down, and you can make a little bit of lists of channels that you can recommend things, and I fiddle around with that. So I actually have a list of channels for developers of games featured. So both Ludi and Ender's channels are listed under there. So definitely go there to check them out if you're not subscribed to them already. And that's probably going to be your best way to see updates as the game comes out. But yeah, I mean, we're really excited and fortunate to have had this opportunity to talk to you guys.
I guess I have just, two questions. Will you guys do, one of those, info videos about, animals that we featured in our game using our game footage? I guess that, if that makes sense, kind of like how you did it for Planet Zoo, and you do it with our game. I guess the second question that I'm really interested in is something that I don't see often on YouTube with our game, is will you guys, maybe do a documentary series, or I guess just a documentary about a certain animal, or I guess a certain biome in our game, and you make something similar to what you'd see in BBC and stuff like that. Do you guys think you have those planned?
I think the first one is definitely something that we could do, and I think especially for species, for example, like impala that aren't in Planet Zoo at all, and I am like one of the biggest impala fans because even though people just look at them and they're like, oh, they just get killed by everything, it's like, well, they've also been incredibly widespread and common, and they've been around for at least over 5 million years, which means that they've survived saber-tooths and giant hyenas, and I think, I don't know, Agriotherium might have still been around, so they were running away from bears. Like, they are just such, like, I mean, I don't want to say perfect, but they are just
Survivors.
the design of an impala and what it's able to do, not just in predator-prey relationships, but other aspects of its life and what it's able to eat, is just so effective for what this planet has been, or at least what the continent of Africa has been. And so I think that I would love to do an impala video, and I think that that's a great way to do that. You've got lots of birds as well that obviously aren't in Planet Zoo, because Planet Zoo hates birds. But,
Yeah.
I think the vultures is a big one that we like to talk about a lot, because I think it's not a conservation issue that many people are aware of, and it's even affecting eagles, like the Marshall eagle. So I can definitely see that. As for BBC level documentary stuff, I know I've seen some kind of amateur-esque things where there will be content creators where they'll get like a bunch of actors essentially.
Yeah, this is what I
from
mean.
some of
I don't mean like
yeah.
highly, developed film thing with like money behind
No,
it.
we call up David Attenborough because we're biologists, which automatically means we know him, and we get him to just
Yeah.
something.
I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear.
Yeah, no, I do get that. I mean, it's definitely an option, because I think, with the literature that we find and the network that we have, there's probably some interesting accounts or ideas of things that not, your average content creator wouldn't think to do. So it's definitely a good suggestion that we could definitely look into more. I think definitely doing the species profile ranking, I mean, it's not that hard to rank because, as I said, Ludi's very talented model and animator, so it's like, it's not, we're not going to put him on a tier list, because it's not like, Planet Zoo's got like some good ones and then they've got some god-awful ones. As well as just general locomotion is off, which is why we don't talk about it a lot of time for the herbivores. But, I think just letting people know, hey, this is what this animal's actually like. This is, some facts that maybe get obscured. These are some myths about it. This is the current conservation. I really like tying in conservation, because I think people really don't understand how dire the situation is right now in a lot of areas. Like, we are losing a lot of these animals really fast, and it is really important to understand what are the threats, what are some potential solutions involving local people. If this is not a humans wildlife separate thing, I really like adding that in. And so to be able to do that for some of the birds and impala and any of those other species would be really good. And I think we have talked a little bit about, even in some of the Planet Zoo videos, just going in and doing like a quick snippet recording thing. Like, I think because we've talked about that for cheetah, because cheetah's a video that we would like to do very soon. And just kind of showing the Planet Zoo one, and then being like, oh, here it is in Wild Savannah as well. This is the sprinting animation, how it turns and, flicks the tail and all this other stuff. So, yeah, definitely want to do more with Wild Savannah in the future.
All right, great.
So, I think that's all we have. So, big thanks to Ludi and Ender for coming on. But we are the Wildlife Wire, signing off.
See you next time.